Thanks for joining us on Coast to Coast Pest Talk.
Blue little, no, we'll put you in silhouette and with like one of those like 2020, like your voice like,
Exactly.
I worked at that company for 10 years.
Okay, fire away, boys.
What's up, guys? Thanks so much for tuning in once again to Coast Pest Talk. I'm your host, Gabe with Pest Patrol, joined here by Andy Sinefsky with Perimatech Pest Management. And today we've got a special guest for you, Phil Cooper. Little background on Phil. He was the owner of Cooper Pest Solutions for how many years, Phil?
34.
Holy smokes, 34 years.
Second generation, so
amazing.
Yeah.
Sits on the board of Bedbug Central. Yeah. Certified EOS implementer and also an author.
I am.
What's your book called, Phil?
It'd be this baby. So what plus how equals wow. It's actually undergoing a rewrite. Fancy new cover coming. Bring it to the digital world, but timeless book, and
that's awesome.
Great. So today we're going to be jumping into hiring for culture and then team member development. So let's jump on in.
So, Phil, it's funny. We started this off when we were just meeting and greeting, and I'm like, hey, I think we should talk about, interviewing and hiring for culture. And right away, we don't get like 2 seconds into it, and you smack me down and like, well, that's a good idea, but here's a better idea. my conversations with you over the last a bunch of times here have all gone like that. Is that something you just come by naturally?
Always challenging. In the EOS world, we call us visionaries. Yeah. Which means, and I'm afraid we're all over the place, but no, it's always, So the answer would be yes, Andy.
Okay, fantastic. So I know Gabe and I, with little businesses, we're interviewing all the time and hiring people and whatnot. And I think this is an area where a lot of businesses can see a lot of improvement. I think is this an area that most businesses like are struggling with and have to like jump this hurdle?
Everybody. I mean, I don't care whether we're talking pest control or we're talking an ice cream manufacturing company or a company that distributes custard machines. Everybody struggles with hiring. Everybody struggles with this culture equation. Who are what we would call the right people? And as we have the conversation, I draw on a bunch of different sources to pull from. I pull from my experience as an EOS implementer, entrepreneurial operating system. People don't know what that means. But I work with all kinds of different companies. And then I pull from, let me see if I have it on the bookshelf. I do. I pull from this book, which is, I think, one of the Bibles, Who Hiring by Jeff Smart and Randy Street. And then finally, I pull from what we do with our accelerated gross profit program, where we work with frontline service managers, and we have, those managers helping with the attracting talent, selection of talent. So all those different things come in when we're looking at culture and making the right choices. So use that as the premise. It's not just Phil Cooper talking. It's drawn from a lot of stuff that I didn't create. It's already out there. Everybody knows it. The problem is we all know it. We just don't do it.
So where are we going wrong as little business owners? We put out an ad, we put out a little job description, somebody shows up, and now we got to talk to them and figure out, is this somebody we're going to let into our business? Where's our first mistake happening?
First mistake is we don't know who we like being around. The way I look, and it starts with what I would call company values. So problem with company values is generally they come from the CEO or the owner, and they're 3/4 of the time aspirational. It's what we want our companies to be. It's not what we are. And when you think of culture, when you think of values, what I want you to think about, so I'm going to ask Gabe a question. I'm going to make him come off of mute. So have you been to like a family function or a family outing, like a graduation or a wedding or something like that in the last 6 months?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. And were there more than like 50 of your family members there?
Yeah.
30, maybe 30. There was a bunch, right?
40, yep.
Andy, you too? You've been to one of those?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And I've got to surmise, I'll bet the house on this one, that there was somebody you walked up to, you smiled, maybe you gave them a kiss on the cheek, you shook their hand, and you went running for the hills.
Yep.
Hey, Phil, I'm from the West Coast. We don't kiss people on the cheek, but
You kissed him, you made him a good smack on the lips, and you still ran for the hills.
Oh my God.
Right? So why do we run
Sure.
for the hills? It's not our kind of person, right? We all have that person or people in the family. Now, let me ask you, does it make that person a bad person?
Nope.
Nope. Just doesn't make them a Gabe person or an Andy person. And by the way, the person you ran from the hills from, Gabe, might be somebody that Andy totally got along with. And that's values. People think that we have a value problem in a company that we can coach it. We can't. It's DNA. It's who we are. And many times, we'll mask competencies or skill into values, and they're not. So Lencioni talks about this tremendously. Street and Smart talk about this a lot. And we have to discover who we really are, not who we want to be. So in the world of EOS, it's one of my favorite sessions when I sit with an hour and a half of the leadership team, and we walk through and we say, who are the 5 people that, if we could build the business around them, not because of what they do, because of who they are, that we could conquer the world. Like we would go to war for them, or we want them with us. We love being around them, and we look for the words that describe them. And then we narrow it down, and we keep working our way till we discover what we believe we are. And then we fire test it, which is and this is just one way of doing it. Remind me to come back to a company in Long Island that I want to tell you about. Okay. And so we fire test it. We test it against the leadership team. If you were to say for each value, it's called, and in EOS land, we call this the people analyzer. It's like the coolest thing. You say, for the value, does the person display it most of the time? That would be a plus. A minus, or a plus minus is more often than not, and a minus, they rarely display it. Actually, when they do it, you want to fall off your chair. You want to like, oh my God, I can't believe they actually said hi to me. Oh, that person actually smiled. Holy crap. Right?
Yep.
We know those people, right? And so, and we have to make sure that the leadership displays the values most of the time, because if the leadership team doesn't display the values, how are you ever going to expect the rest of the company to display the values? As the leadership team goes, so goes everybody. And if it's a one person, let's say it's a 5-person company, and it's, me as the CEO, and I've got my 4 other people. If I say I want somebody who is constantly, pushing everybody and, being that go-getter attitude, and I'm a laid-back person, that's aspirational then. Like, I've got to really display those things. And so once we discover, so that's step 1. Like, if we don't know who we are, how could we ever interview and go and find the right people? But when we have the right people in the company, all the right people, things become so much easier. Isn't it so much better going to work with people that you like than people that you can't stand?
For sure. Well, and also I found as you have more of the right people, you have fewer need for stringent processes and rules. Not that you don't need processes. Everybody needs standard operating procedures and whatnot. But like, if you find in my past, if I find myself making rules because we have a person that we're trying to rein in, we just need to not have that person.
Yep.
It's not about like if you find yourself putting in rules specifically to try to control someone, you have a person problem, not a rule problem.
Exactly. Right. And we know that. And the other thing that we get so hung up on can the person do the job? Do they have the skills? Do they have the competencies? And we should get hung up on that. But if we have the wrong person, the person that doesn't fit our values, does it matter if they can do the job? It doesn't. So when I'm teaching interviewing, we go values first, competency second. Street and Smart also say the same thing. If you've got the wrong person, why are you worrying about whether they can do the job or not? Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Let's worry if we've got a right person first, and then let's see if they can do the job that we want.
Yeah.
Totally different.
This makes a ton of sense to me. I've preached for 2 years on this podcast on know thyself first, right? Like so many of our businesses, we don't know ourselves, we don't know our businesses, we don't really know what we're trying to do and what we value. So we just mimic other people and things that we see and things we think we want.
Yep.
Now, how do you protect against just hiring a lot of people like yourself? Because I could see you someone listen to this and go, well, I like these things and this person likes these same things. And then you just end up with a bunch of clones as opposed to diverse people with different strengths and whatnot.
I don't think it's so wrong from a values perspective to have clones. There's a difference between the different things that, what we may display more often than not, but what we do want culture clones. So think of Chick-fil-A, great values, great culture attracts the people that we want and repels the people that we don't want. There is a million people out there that would never in a million years ever want to work for Chick-fil-A. Either they don't believe in what they believe for with being closed on Sunday, or they don't like that everybody looks the same for the most part. Doesn't matter, what gender you are, what nationality you are, you look the part. And you are the part, because that's why I don't care whether I go to Chick-fil-A in Pennsylvania or Missouri or Texas or New York. They have the same, people are always smiling. They want to help you. They have that go attitude. So they're cloned. Oh, and by the way, they're drawn from the same labor pool that Burger King across the street is drawn from, that there's 2 cars in line and it takes longer than it takes 20 cars to get through the line, right? And we know that. So I am going to say that we do want to clone the values because it's who you are. And so then I'll go back and where I was going back before, the shout out. I'm going to shout out a company in Long Island. So if I said we do this in EOS, and there's a ton of people listening to this that don't do EOS and they're never going to do EOS. And they maybe don't have a facilitator or an implementer to help them guide them through that discovery process. So how in the world do you figure out what your values are? Because again, I can't tell you how many companies I go to that have values and they have them on their website and they say they have them and they're living them. And then when you acid test them, they fail. So a company in Long Island who I ran across, it's a company called Advantages, and Fran Biderman Gross, and she's like rock star. So she speaks at, as part of Harvard faculty, and her company takes companies through values discovery all the time. So, anybody that's out there, you can drop my name, let them know I don't get anything out of it, except knowing that companies can go on a values journey. If you really want to figure out your values and you need help, like slam dunk, you will walk away from that like totally mind-blowing experience. But that's what you have to do, however you get there. And they should really be no more than 5. And they should be descriptive, so we know exactly who we are looking for, so we can then create behavioral interview questions around the values. And again, if you're not familiar with behavioral interviewing and how to do that, that's where this comes in. This will, guide you right through. They do a remarkable job of walking through how to do a values interview. And then what we're doing there is we want somebody that fits the values. And then when they come in the door and we're onboarding them, we'll know within the first week or two if we made a mistake. You can make mistakes. It's okay. You just want that person out quick. Hire quick, fire faster.
There you go. Oh my gosh. So are most people doing a values interview, or are they doing a basic competency interview?
Most people are doing basic competency interviews.
Yeah.
They're doing skill competency. They don't do a values. I'm going to do a values. What Street and Smart call is a cultural competency. And then they're going to do, after that interview is done and we check the box off with that, we're going to then do the skill competency. What are the things that, what are they going to be responsible for? What are the activities that they need? And we're going to be looking at, the skill. We're going to be looking at their emotional intelligence for the job. We're going to be looking at their physical, if there's any physical requirements. If you need to fit under a crawl space, you have to be able to get through the hole. You got to get through the door, right? And some people can't get through that door. I mean, if you're, if you're Jordan Mailata, and you're 6'8" and 340 pounds, you're not getting into the crawl space.
That's right.
Isn't going to happen in most crawl spaces, right? So, by the way, for those who don't know, that's a big offensive lineman for the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yes. Fantastic offensive lineman for sure. I wasn't sure about him last year, but I love him this year.
But yeah, you're not going to fit that guy you're not getting into a crawl space.
Yeah.
Okay.
So do you see a value in doing, like basic competency? Those seems like easy things to exclude people out of the pool, like right on the front end, and then have the more extensive values interview be reserved for people that pass that sort of basic level.
Yeah, and I'll take a step, even go backwards. I look, when I'm looking at how people are posting ads, I'm always a big fan of the ad being different and attracting the talent we want and repelling the people that we don't want. Like, I would much rather get a higher ratio of candidates that qualify than a whole bunch of junk that I'm screening out.
Yeah.
And I see Gabe nodding his head. So what do you think?
Yeah.
Now, Gabe, you just did something like that. I think you had an ad that was an anti-ad, right? For like, don't come here. It was basically, can you talk about that for a sec?
Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. I basically put together something, hey, don't come here if you're going to show up late, cry when you get into crawl spaces, if et cetera, make excuses for your work, et cetera, et cetera. Et
Love
cetera.
it. Like, how cool is that, right?
Gabe, did you get anybody from that?
No, it's funny. Ironically, I then 2 days later ended up hiring off of, I had an Indeed ad running.
Okay.
So I hired my guy off of that, but that got great engagement on socials. And I think ironically, what I found is that just the ad itself, like that type of ad, the kind of more aggressive style, actually attracts the type of people that I want.
Absolutely.
Like, even outside of the content, it's just it's really, really interesting.
Yeah, 100%, right? And why do you think that happens, Gabe?
Well, I think because a lot of who I'm going after are younger men. That's the demographic, by and large, of the workers in, crawl space related pest control. And young men really appreciate that very blunt, in your face, like rise up kind of messaging. So,
and I would bet, when we sold Cooper in 2018, we had 5 women techs. I call them girl techs. I get slapped around by the ladies that, when I call them girls, but I would suspect those girls would have applied to that ad because those kind of qualities appealed. But you want those, it doesn't matter whether male, female, purple, doesn't matter what they are. If they fit that, you want those people. And so it makes it a lot easier. Oh, by the way, you think it makes it easier when you start to do the interview, right? So yeah. But it starts with knowing your values, and then you have to know your competencies. Everybody thinks, a pest control technician is the same in every company. Not so. If all I'm doing is outside of residential homes, it's different than if they're going into commercial environments all the time and have to go through safety stuff. It's just different. If I need them pounding out 18 stops a day, it's different than if I want them doing 10 stops a day or going to the same location all day long. I mean, right, Andy, if you're talking commercial only, totally different than a residential tech.
Yeah, Gabe and I couldn't share technicians.
No.
I think one time you show our technicians those harnesses for going on the roof, they'd be like, no, I quit.
Right? So, because you're tied down and you've got all your roof safety and all that stuff, right? But it's stunning how many companies don't interview like this. And they don't think about those competencies. They bring a person in, they just talk to them. They see if they like them. Then they hire them. Oh, and they're worried about warm bodies because they can't fill positions. By the way, the other thing that I'm going to say, when I say this over and over, and I said this to you, Andy, which is if you're, again, when we're talking pest control technicians, we're talking people in the field. If they love their manager, their, what we'll call the frontline manager, which is the majority of the people in our companies, right? It is the people in the field delivering our service. They should be bringing people. They should be referring people. And I say it should be to a person. So if we have 10 technicians, I would expect 20 referrals in a year. And so, Gabe, I'll ask you, how many technicians do you guys have?
I've got 4 techs.
4 techs. And you got 8 referrals last year, right?
No.
I
got 3.
3. Right. Which we all would think would be great. And I would say that your acid test of a really strong culture and a really great manager is 8. Yeah. I'd love to be metric driven. I mean, is the work that I'm putting in paying off the way I would expect it to pay off? That's why Chick-fil-A doesn't have a labor problem. I'll go back to them. They don't. And yet Burger King across the street can't find a damn soul. And they're not paying a whole lot different. And they're really not drawing from a different pool. Same pool. They just are crystal clear on what they want, who they want, and what those people have to be able to do. And so then all those people there, because they love what they're doing, and they usually love their manager because their manager has been really trained really well, they bring their friends. Chick-fil-A is still advertising, and they're still getting more new ones, but the majority don't come that way. And it's not because of a referral bonus, I can tell you that.
So does this plant the seeds where we see companies, they'll get to a certain stage and then have a sort of come to Jesus moment of, oh boy, we've got to get rid of a bunch of people and restructure and figure ourselves out. Is this what leads that? They didn't really know exactly what they were about, and then they hired towards just who knows what, got a bunch of bodies in there, and now you got to do some clean out. Is this?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that's why they have constant turnover. And they don't understand why. And they think they say they have a great culture when they don't really have a culture at all. They think they do, but they really don't.
I always say it's a feral culture. It's culture gone wild. It's just left to its own devices.
And by the way, and it's not about taking the values and putting them up on a wall or putting them on a mug. Another company that does, once you have the values identified, another company that's out there that does great work is called CultureWise, which is putting the culture deeply into the organization. In EOS, we say you hire, you fire, but you do 3 R's with your values. You reward, you review, and you recognize. And you're doing it all the time. You must live your values. Live them, breathe them, that everybody can see, they know them. In my company, we did this afternoon. Every Wednesday we gather everybody because we're all virtual. I have a virtual company now that delivers our accelerated gross profit program. And we gather everybody and we do value shout outs. We celebrate. And we say, and we say it, whether it could be one of our clients that's displaying, because we want our clients also to display our values if we can. It's, it's more fun to work with people that you like and clients that you like.
Yeah.
But we're shouting out everybody, and we live the values so that everybody knows that we flame the fire, and everybody knows that we want to own it all. And we know that we want to be a champion, and they can describe what that looks like. And they can describe those values. It's just not words, it's meaning.
So now this is just an aside. If you're all remote now, do you see a difference in the actual things you have to do to relate culture when you were in person majority versus now all remote? Is it? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of similarities, but I think there's probably actually like structural things that are different about how you have to do this. What are some of those?
Yeah. You just have to really work it, because, that's why we have a huddle that spends, 20-25 minutes just dealing with culture. We're not becoming any more efficient in getting anything done other than reinforcing our values, and to us that, all the money we're spending on bricks and mortar, goes into that. I mean, there's, look, I have plenty of CEO friends that just completely think virtual is the stupidest thing in the entire world, and they want in-person only. And in-person only is having a strong comeback right now. There's a lot of companies that are going like, we're done with this virtual stuff. We want, everybody's got to come into the office, or they've got to come in 3 days. There's a seismic shift happening right now. It's 5 years out of COVID now, 4 years out of COVID. I think if you're intentional, you can make it work either way, but you've got to be intentional, and you've got to just really, really, really work it, to your point, Andy.
Yeah. And it's funny because that's exactly what we found. We have some virtual staff, and we have mostly in-person staff. And I found to get the same level of feeling of connection for our virtual staff, we have to be 10 times more explicit to an unnatural level. Like where in person it would seem like too much, it's probably not enough for the virtual person. You have to be more explicit and more intentional. And I think people tend towards the in-person, and maybe there's why this pull back into the office. It's more intuitive for most of us, I think. I think the in-person we learned since we were a little kid, how to make friends on the playground, and like these things are intuitive, whereas the virtual connection, it takes a little skill, a little like intentionality.
I can't see I can't see if your feet are tapping right now or whether you're sitting still. But if I'm in person, I can.
Right.
And spatially, I can see things. And we also know, and I want to get to the development thing because I know there's time is, our enemy. There's also these studies that when they know, if we're on calls like this all day long, it takes the brain 50% more brain power. And we know that's why people who work in a virtual world and they work an 8-hour day are more tired than somebody working in person for 8 hours, because the brain wasn't created. We aren't wired to do this. We just weren't. So there's so many studies coming out. There's so much happening. It's still evolving. We're still learning, but it is not the same.
Yep, absolutely. I think it's funny when we have the intention to have a discussion about interviewing for culture. We haven't had a single mention of a interview question, of anything like any of that. And I think that's fantastic because I think most of the real meat and potatoes of what drives your business is all this subtext that we never end up talking about. Yep. We'll talk about, here's 5 interview questions to get the right employee.
I can go get the interview questions right in here. I don't need to talk about it. You just,
Yep. It's fantastic.
And again, it's just, if I know that I want a go-getter, whatever it is, I'm going to do a behavioral. Again, the books are there to tell you, oh, by the way, guess what? I'll give you a better one. I wish I could share my screen right now. Here, Gabe, do this for me. Which AI do you use?
ChatGPT.
Okay. You have values, right?
Yeah.
Okay, give me one of your. I'm going to put you on the side. If you can't say it, it's okay. Then we'll embarrass you. Give me one of your values.
All right, I have 2 values, and both of them Andy and I basically came up with like 3 months ago. So one of them is hard work is good.
Okay. Do you have a description of what hard work is good looks like? Or do you just know that it's hard work is good? Okay. So just go into ChatGPT while we're here and just type in, please, hard work is good is one of our company values.
Okay.
Please give me 4 behavioral interview questions to ask a candidate. And let's see what ChatGPT comes back with. I use AI every day.
Now we need the Jeopardy music. I don't think anyone's here to hear myself and Phil Cooper sing, but you get that. That's the extra value you get with our podcast.
Look, I believe ChatGPT is a tool. I don't, take everything at face value. I'm going to fact check it and I'm going to acid test it, but it's my greatest starting point.
All right. First one here. This one feels fairly boilerplate. Tell me about a time when you had to push through a particularly tough or exhausting day at work. What kept you going?
Yeah, so funny, right? So number one, before you even did that, I told you that we would ask a question like, tell me about a time.
Yeah.
So we know behavioral interview questions start with it every time. Of course, that's how it would start.
Yeah.
So give us the value one more time so everybody watching this can remember what it was.
Value is hard work is good.
Okay, so now listen to the question, everybody, and listen how Gabe could then get them to give examples. Go ahead, read it again.
Try to keep going down the list or do that
We'll
same?
do that one again. Let's pick this one apart.
Sure. Tell me about a time when you had to push through a particularly tough or exhausting day at work. What kept you going?
Now, as we do that one, and let's say I'm doing, you asking to Andy and he's giving the answer. I might say, how did that make you feel? Can you elaborate more? Did you ever think of giving up? So I'm going to do follow-up questions.
Right.
Oh, and by the way, these guys do a remarkable job of helping with follow-up questions. Or I bet you on the first one for question 1, you might follow into ChatGPT, type in for question number 1, what follow-up questions might I ask?
Right.
And it's going to do exactly what I just said. I know what it's going to come back with.
Yeah.
Give me one more. I'm just curious. And then everybody gets the idea.
Can you give me an example of a time when you were assigned a task that others avoided or didn't want to do? How did you handle it?
As you're watching this podcast, when you're thinking about, once you have your values established, I don't care whether you go through the book or you do what Gabe and I just did. It's out there. Then it's just doing the interview. And by the way, I love to do a values interview with 2 people, or if you have the time, Gabe does the interview with me and Andy does the interview with me, and then they compare notes so that I can't, I may be able to come with BS answers to one person, but I'm probably not going to duplicate them with the second person.
Yeah, we're big fans of the tandem interview, 2 interviewers at a time. You're writing down notes. The other person's still able to hear things. The other person will hear a follow up to your question that you wouldn't have thought of, and you catch so much more with a tandem interview setup.
So thank you. That was a nice segue there, Andy. I mean, right into the questions and showing everybody how quickly they can get their questions figured out.
There we go. So now let's say we get a person and they're great. They're, we think they're awesome. They start up. I know we wanted to talk a little bit about how do we pick people to promote, to invest in? How do we pick people, weed them out after the fact, or, that kind of thing. Let's talk about that a little bit.
So what we know in entrepreneurial companies is that when we pick somebody to go to the next management position, whether they're going to an entry level frontline manager position, or whether we pick them to be the next customer service manager or the manager of the accounting department or a branch manager or a regional manager, generally speaking, we know on the entry level that 50% of the time we pick the wrong person. So what happens typically for whether we're in pest control or elevator maintenance or home security, we have the people in the field and we need that next person up in that entry level position. So what do? We say, who do we like and who's doing the best job? Who seems to be personable? And we go, tag, you're it. Is that correct, Andy and Gabe?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we know that 50% of the time, our statistics, we've seen hundreds of managers 50% of the time, we pick the wrong one because there's no real criteria. And what we've learned are there 4 things that the person must have. They must have yeses next to all 4 items in order to be able to develop them, because we're putting them into a position that they're not ready for or need to be developed in. So if I have a service manager and they're going to become a branch manager, there's things that they have to learn. If I'm taking a service technician, I want to put them into an entry-level position, into a management position, they've never been a manager, there's things that they have to learn, right? We have to teach them. So here are the 4 things. Number 1, they must have a passion to learn what is required for the position they're being promoted into. So if you tell me you want to promote me to the head of project management at Lockheed Martin over engineers, putting satellites into outer space, I don't think I'm going to really like the stuff I have to study. That's not, but if you give me a management position in a service company, I'll eat it up. So do you have the passion to learn stuff that you're going to have to learn? Second, do you have the, let me go through the 4 and I'll just whip back around real quick. Yep. So passion to learn, aptitude to learn, follows instruction, love your people. So we did the first one, passion to learn. Number 2, do you have the smarts to learn the material that you're going to be expected to learn? You may have to read, you may have to watch some videos, you may have to go to class. If I have to learn physics, it's different than I have to learn how to interview for a behavioral interview. So do I have the, am I a box of rocks? Do I have to be do I have to be a rocket scientist? They're different for different positions. We have to know different stuff. So do I have so 1, do I have the desire? But 2, do I have the aptitude? Number 3, follows instruction. While you're learning how to do this position, you're going to be told to do things because you've never done them before. Do you follow that instruction or do you fight the person? Have you ever developed a person and you spent more time trying to convince them to do what you're asking them to do? Why are you laughing, Andy?
I've been down all these roads.
It's what happens, right?
Yeah.
We're convincing the person, just listen to me, please. Please try it my way first before you convince me that my way is wrong. Or they go into it to show you that you're wrong, to prove that they're right, instead of giving your way. You're like, if this is what I want you to do it. And then number 4, which is not negotiable, you've got to care. You've got to really want, when I say love your people, you need to get joy out of having impact. If your technicians, if you're making impact on your technicians and they're improving and it doesn't jazz you with the improvement, both personally and professionally, if you don't get real joy out of that, you have no business ever managing somebody. Think of the worst manager that you ever worked for. And it's probably somebody that just didn't get joy out of making you better. They didn't make you better. They brought the worst out in you. And there's nothing worse. So when we stick a group of people with a really bad manager who doesn't care about them, like, how wrong is that?
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, I had a manager like that at Cooper that we had for many years, and we held on to that person for years. And we couldn't understand why that manager had 75% turnover and the rest of the company had 10%. How many people how wrong was it to those 75% of those people who left the company?
Yeah. Now I've had a theory about this a little bit. So let's say you get kind of the right people and you're at that Chick-fil-A and you said, okay, we're going to do a swap and we're going to take all those Chick-fil-A people and we're going to take them across the street and they're going to put on McDonald's uniforms and all those McDonald's people are going to come across the street and put on Chick-fil-A uniforms. How much is the system and how much is they pick the right people? Like, will that McDonald's all of a sudden start to perform well, or will they come down to the average? Like they'll perform down?
Well, first of all, I'm going to ask you a question. Are you pulling everybody out?
No, just the employee, just the staff, none of the management.
If the management's not around and those employees are left to their own devices, they'll probably make the McDonald's better. But if they're around, but if there are bad culture fits and there's people that are, if those employees aren't able to display their values, if they're suppressed, then it won't happen. But if you just take that whole thing up and they go in and none of the values aren't systems. Values are how we act. And if they're allowed to, those Chick-fil-A people were actually allowed to act that same way, yeah, I think the McDonald's would flourish. The problem is that's never going to happen because we're not getting rid of all the bad eggs at McDonald's. Mm-hmm. And now the good, you ever been, okay, so there's going to be some people there that are what we call plus minus. They display the value more often than not. So I have, Gabe has a plus minus. He's displaying hard work more often than not. You're not always displaying hard work. You're just doing it more often than not, Gabe. Not right. Normal, right? And you bring me, and then now you're around me, and I'm like a slug. And you're with me all day long. Do you start working harder or working less if you're around me, the slug, all day long?
Less.
Less. Now I put you with Andy, and Andy is the hardest working person in the world. And what are you going to do?
Yeah.
Yeah. So and Andy's example, if I take those Chick-fil-A people and stick them into McDonald's, what they're going to be around, not people that display those values. And so what happens? The values start to dip.
Okay. This makes a lot of sense to me. Sorry, Gabe, interrupted. I see you got a thought. Hold on to it. Don't forget it. Yep. So this goes back to a theory I had a couple years back, and I think this is kind of crystallizing it for me a little bit. Is that in these our little companies, just bringing it back to pest control here, we got these little companies that start off. They can outperform a lot of companies because you have an owner operator that's right there. That's a plus. That's probably, he went out on his own, whatever. And then you'll have some plus minuses. You'll have some minuses. In that small setting, the plus minuses will perform as pluses because they're around a plus. If you have a crappy job situation, the plus minuses perform as minuses. And so then your average now is drawn down. Mm-hmm. And so you have this anchor, in a bad situation, but in a good situation. So I think you could take, like, if I imagined, a staff of technicians in a really good culture system, half of them are going to be great. The pluses are in a bad situation, just going to leave. They're not even going to stay there. The plus minuses are going to go one way or the other, depending on the context. Yeah. And so those little companies tend to move people up, and the bad, and a lot of times it's in the bigger companies, they tend to move people down. And
the little companies usually have one person who's a minus, rarely displays it, but is a great producer, either the best salesperson or the highest production tech out there. Yep. And we don't get rid of them because, oh my God, we can't replace Mary or John.
Yep.
And that person's a cancer. Mm-hmm. And we spend, and knowing that every new hire costs us at least $20,000 minimum. It's what it costs when we make a hiring mistake or we have to bring somebody new in. You just be better off you just rip the Band-Aid, you rip the Band-Aid off and you deal with it.
Yeah.
What I like to say is short-term pain for long-term gain.
Well, and if I don't know if you've ever read Top Grading. Mm-hmm. He talks a lot about this. And if your hiring is your process is bad, that your chances of getting right back in the same boat with a C player, a D player, you end up not taking that chance. You don't get rid of your C's because you might end up with a D. But if you can have better than 50%, like you're saying, like if you know how to find the right people, your lower end performers, you just get rid of them. You're like, no, I'll get a better one.
That's right.
You have that confidence.
And again, you got to put people into the right position. You go back to, the other thing, I'll go back to what we do now. This thing called accelerated gross profit that we've created. We knew the problem was that companies spend like thousands of dollars on trying to develop managers. And, they send them to countless courses, but they never figure out, what should that manager be doing every day. and they don't figure out what kind of education they actually need to make that happen. And, we unlocked it. I mean, it's so cool. And so, we take that manager and we just get them the right education and give them the right activities, but then we give them coaching. And, you go back, everything we've talked about today, if I'm going to teach them how to interview correctly, they have to be coached. You can go to class and you can go to school and you can learn all kinds of stuff. But if you don't reinforce it and get the person to do it over and over again, it doesn't work. So we've talked about repetition. We've talked about culture. We talk about values. We have to reinforce it all the time. And if we're trying to develop a manager, especially an entry-level manager, it's not just about watching another manager. It's not just about going to a YouTube video. It's not just about reading the book. It's about the execution of that. It's about actually doing the behavioral interview and actually performing it and role-playing it and practicing it. And to me, figuring out those activities and then doing the coaching, that's where we mess up. And watching what we've been able to do with managers and frontline managers in service industries it's cool because it unlocks all that. It's what we've talked about.
Yeah. Okay. What was your thing, Gabe? I interrupted you.
Oh, no. Yeah. We'll skip that. Yeah,
Okay.
Not applicable anymore.
Yeah. Okay. No problem. So we got somebody that we think has passion, has aptitude, and they take instruction. They love our people and stuff. How are we still not finding all the right people? How do we end up with the wrong people in the management? What are we doing wrong with these?
Well, I mean, typically we don't ask that question. I mean, if you go back to any of your failed managers, I would put your money on it that one of those boxes had a no next to it when you got done. If they had the passion to learn, they had the aptitude, they followed instruction, and they loved their people, they stood a fighting chance of succeeding. Now, they may not have reached their potential. And I would argue that, if you structured their development better, they would be better at what they do. But I'm going to surmise that they're not going to fail. That they're going to do, because they're going to be if they have a passion to learn and you're in a service manager position, you're going to try to figure out if nobody's showing you how to be the best service manager, you're going to try to figure it out. You're going to go on social media. Maybe you're going to be more active on LinkedIn. Maybe you're going to go onto YouTube and find you're going to read. If you really want it, you're going to figure it out. That's why 50% of the managers do a pretty good job. They're not fantastic, but in the service industry, we've been lulled in this belief that our managers can't get a whole lot better because when we send them to this education, they go to the education, we come back and we ask them 2 weeks later what they're doing with it. And what do they say? Well, not a lot.
Right. So are you saying we more often end up with somebody that's in a management position that is capable, that we are underserving by not providing professional development the right ways and not giving them opportunities to actually apply the craft of managing? We got them doing half a route and managing and whatever. So we're underserving them. It's not that they're not the right person necessarily.
Yeah. I'm going to say that, look, that entry level position is, to me, the most underserved position in the entire country. We just don't equip them with what they need. And can a manager still run half a route? Yeah. I know that to really be a great manager, for span of control, you need 4 to 5 hours per person. So if I'm managing 5 people, that's 25 hours. Between 20 and 25. Does that leave time to run a half a route? Of course it does. Because a manager is not working 40 hours a week. A manager's working 50 hours. And by the way, if you ask most service managers, they're working more than 50 hours a week. My son is a manager for American Pest in Virginia, and I can promise you he ain't working 50 hours. I watch him. He's doing more like 55 to 70. That's what he does.
Bill, on those 4 things, that's a really helpful framework. Is there room for say they've got 2, 3, and 4, and you don't feel like they really have a passion to learn about the industry. Is there a place to like communicate that with them and say, hey, listen, I'm considering you for this position. I feel like you've got this, this, and this going, but I don't see that you really have a love for the industry, or I don't see that whatever. And like see if like, can people grow in these things, I guess.
I'm going to say,
Phil, hold on. Before you answer, I just want to interject one thing. I had this conversation with my wife because I knew she had the aptitude. She's smart as a whip. She could take instruction. Believe it or not, my wife does take instruction from me. And she loved our people. And I had to have a sit-down conversation to say, you could be anything you want to be in this industry, but you have to decide that you want to be in this industry. We got to the point of the business where it's either you're in this business and in this industry and you dive headlong and you can be awesome, or not. You can't halfway be in this. You can't. And she chose to go all in. So I that was my personal experience on that, is like you got to present that to them and be like, this may be that turning point. So okay, sorry Phil, that's my little personal story, but
no, it's a great segue. I'm going to say it this way, Gabe. It comes from the heart. I can't manufacture it and I can't coach it. What I can say is I can make somebody aware of it, and I'm going to know in 4 weeks if they have it or not. See, the problem that we do all too often is we wait months. Mm-hmm. It's going to take time. It's no different than in anything that has activity. I'm same thing in a totally separate topic of a salesperson. And I talk to all of the companies I work with in all kinds of industries. I say, how long will it take you to figure out if you got a good salesperson? They go 3 to 6 months. I go 4 weeks tops, really 2. If I know the activities that they're going to do, I'm just going to go watch them do the core activities for 2 weeks, even if they have no idea what they're doing, no idea about my industry. Like the things that I interview to, can they display what they need to do?
No, would you recommend? So not only when we have new hires, there's sort of a probation period, right? They come in and they're sort of being evaluated for the first 90 days. Would that be something you'd recommend for people moving into a different position in your company? Like, look, you have a 4-week or a 60-day probation period. Let's test this out, and if it's not working, we're going to know right away, and let's move you out of there. You could. I'm really going to just say, hey, these are the 4 attributes you have to display. Do you believe you display them? And I'm going to be watching you over the next 4 weeks. And if I don't see it like coming out, we're going to call it. I'm not going to call it probation. I'm just going to say, you can call it probation. I don't care what you call it. Yeah, whatever. Evaluation. Whatever. Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
But if you have these 4 things, I'm confident we can do something with you. But if you don't, and I'll be able to show you why.
Yeah.
Like, it's not just about saying they don't have them. If I can't show them data for what I always like to say is, if let's say you don't think you have the passion to learn, if I can't show you 3 times where you didn't display that passion, then it's probably in my mind, not really real. I want 3 points of data that show that Phil Cooper didn't have a passion to learn. And Gabe, you show me data point number 1, and I usually will argue that one. I'll try to convince you that you're wrong. Then you show me data point number 2, and I sort of like, I try to convince you a little bit, but my argument's a little less. You come up with the 3rd point, and usually I go, uncle, you got me.
It's funny because we had a situation sort of like this. We had, and she doesn't mind me sharing this, but Heather, one of our admins, wanted to move into a sales position to do like cold calling and this thing. And we're like, okay, let's give this a shot. Took about 3 weeks. We were meeting regularly on it. It was a giant failure, and we all knew it right away. And then we're like, nope, that's okay. Cool. You thought you were going to like it?
Send her, we would, I mean,
yep.
You could probably know that in 3 days. Give her,
give her 100 calls
for 3 days and look at her attitude and see if she's smiling.
Yeah.
Because people that love doing it, they don't mind the rejection. They don't mind people hanging up on them. They thrive on that. They're great.
Yep.
Nothing wrong with that. Yeah.
Yep. Phil, that was fabulous. I think there's so many things that Gabe and I have talked over the last year or two where I hear you say them and I'm just like, hallelujah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. It's funny because I have some of my notes I took this afternoon furiously in between things. And one of the first things I wrote down when we were going to talk about interviewing for Culture Fit was first understand the culture you have and the culture you want, and as being like the number one key thing that people don't do right. And it warmed my heart. You led right off with that. I was like, oh, perfect. This is great. Phil, thanks so much for coming on. This is fantastic.
Did it hit the marks that you wanted?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
100%.
No, I'm super passionate about it, right?
For sure.
You've been listening to Coast with Andy, can't pronounce his last name, and Gabe Seymour. Join me, Pete Chopin, probably in another 5 years from now when they invite me on again.